As the dust is now settling on NBA free agency, one player who decided to stay with the Raptors is Gary Trent Jr. And just when it seemed as though a long-term extension was imminent for the player, all of the noise died down. So, what is the Raptors front office hiding about the 24-year-old shooting guard? Let's get into it. Welcome everybody to Amateur Hour Sports. This is the YouTube channel dedicated to Toronto Raptors content in videos, live streams, and shorts. If you enjoy what you see from today's video, then make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more content like this all throughout the offseason, and we're getting very close to that 15,000 subscriber milestone that you can help us hit. But all of the noise after the free agent season for the Toronto Raptors was about, well, Fred VanVleet leaving the team, the additions of Schroeder, the additions of McDaniels, and Jakob Poeltl remaining with the team. But another player who decided to stay with the team leading up to that free agent period was Gary Trent Jr., who, to the surprise of many Raptors fans and NBA fans all over, the player decided to opt into his contract for the upcoming season worth $18.5 million rather than chasing a long-term extension elsewhere where he almost certainly would have gotten a better payday. Now, Gary Trent Jr. is not coming off of his most formidable season. Part of that was down to his own play. Gary Trent Jr. just really wasn't operating at his best this season, and part of that definitely was the fact that he did end up on the bench for much of the season as the sixth man. Now, this was out of necessity when the acquisition of Jakob Poeltl came in. It didn't make sense to make the trade for Jakob Poeltl and have him coming off the bench, but you also have to go back to that point where Gary Trent Jr.'s play factored into this one quite a bit, because it was not the jump that we were expecting from the player. After his first full season with the Raptors, we were extremely excited about the prospect of what he could bring to the team on the offensive end and the prospect of what he could develop on the defensive end as well. The defensive capabilities really did not shine through this season, and with a little bit of a dip in production as far as the offensive game went, it felt as though Gary Trent Jr. could produce more, and therefore perhaps the opting into the contract was a safety net, so Gary Trent could perhaps bet on himself, play one more season under this contract, hopefully improve his game. At the end of that season, the end of the next season, then he was going to focus on his extension. Many players have done this. Many players have done this successfully. Many players like Dennis Schroeder have done this unsuccessfully. Remember when Dennis Schroeder turned down a 4-year, $84 million contract to bet on himself? That one didn't quite work out, but I thought that the best course of action for Gary Trent, who I believe is a very talented player, would have been to maybe take the long-term money, but also, yeah, take the player option, play one more year, and get your extension. But that was not going to be the case, according to reports from many credible sources after the free agent season. Gary Trent Jr., it seemed as though, was working on an extension for a long-term deal to stay with the Toronto Raptors. Part of the reason perhaps for taking that player option was allowing for more time to negotiate a extension with the Raptors organization because, with all the things going on behind the scenes, Fred VanVleet potentially leaving, Jakob Poeltl potentially leaving, the focus wasn't necessarily on the amount of money needed to pay Gary Trent Jr. The focus maybe was going to be on, well, we want to keep these players with our team, and if they don't stay, we need to work on replacing them. So Gary Trent Jr. bought himself a bit more time, going to make $18.5 million this season, which isn't nothing, work on that long-term extension, and according to those preliminary reports, that extension was going to be in the range of $26 to $27 million. But in the last week or so, there has been absolutely no noise, no discussions, no reports as to Gary Trent's long-term extension, which is quite peculiar here, especially given the fact that we have so much information about the contract. And it really seemed as though Gary Trent Jr. signing that contract extension with the Raptors was imminent, when all of a sudden everything went dark. So, what is going on behind the scenes for the Raptors to have made this topic completely mute? Well, we have to speculate exactly what the ongoing process is behind the scenes. And if there's any skeptics into the Pascal Siakam situation, the biggest thing going on at the moment right now is that Gary Trent Jr. isn't quite the priority on the list of what the Raptors need to do in the offseason, because there are some impending free agents that are a very big deal. Pascal Siakam is a free agent at the end of the season, and there's really no reason for Siakam to sign an extension with the team right now, because if he makes All-NBA this season, then he is eligible for a Supermax, and that is absolutely what the player is going to be gunning for. It's highly realistic. Siakam can earn that third All-NBA team berth and therefore get himself in line for that Supermax contract. OG Anunoby is also a free agent at the end of the season, and there's no reason really for him to sign that extension with the Raptors because he's eligible to a max contract up to an average of about $26.7 million per year. And if OG Anunoby puts on a good season and gets himself in a little bit of a bidding war in the offseason, and there's going to be a ton of teams queuing up to hand OG Anunoby a contract, I don't think it's out of the realms of possibilities OG ends up with a max contract, and certainly he's going to end up in the $30 million range per season. So no reason for Siakam to sign a contract, no reason for OG Anunoby to sign a contract. We need to worry about what the course of action is going to be for these players so we don't wind up with another situation like Fred VanVleet where, yeah, the expectation is the player is going to stay with the team, but if all of a sudden cap space opens up somewhere else, and an offer the player can't refuse comes in, like one came from the Houston Rockets, worth a max contract, like $43 million a year for Fred VanVleet, we lose the player for free. So, in this whole process going on right now, the biggest news coming out about the Raptors, and it's not been about Gary Trent, it's been all about Pascal Siakam. We already know this, and the Raptors wanting to move Pascal Siakam in a trade. The Atlanta Hawks seem poised, and it seems like they're the favorites to land the player, but there's also other teams lurking the waters, like potentially the Indiana Pacers, like potentially the Orlando Magic, and like potentially the Sacramento Kings, among many other teams. And in this whole process, we need to worry about what we're going to get back here because it's very, very clear that the Raptors are shopping the player. And what's made it even more clear is the fact that once again, we have held off the talks in these Gary Trent Jr. contract negotiations. Because when it comes to a Pascal Siakam trade, we don't know exactly what the payment structure is going to be that's coming back to us. Is it going to be expiring contracts? Is it going to be long-term contracts? Is it going to be young players who we're going to have to extend in a minimal amount of time? All of these things are going to play into the financial situation of the Toronto Raptors. So worrying about these finances is going to become the priority rather than giving Gary Trent Jr. that extension on his contract. So what I imagine is happening right now for the Raptors is that there definitely was a long-term extension in place for Gary Trent Jr. to stay with the Raptors. But that's in place. That's ready to go. But in terms of the payment structure, front-loading it, back-loading it, there's going to be an additional concern into exactly what the team actually looks like in a month or two and what's going to happen with the team before we commit that money to Gary Trent Jr. Because on top of Siakam and OG Anunoby being free agents, Scottie Barnes is going to be extension eligible at the end of the season. And for somebody who won Rookie of the Year, Scottie Barnes is no doubt going to be looking for a max contract as he should. So the financial situation of the Raptors, the retaining player situation of the Raptors right now is looking a little bit bleak. But thankfully, we can have a little bit of reassurance here that Gary Trent Jr. wants to remain with the team long term. So if there was any sort of skepticism into Siakam and what's going on there, this is a very clear indication based on what's going on with Gary Trent. That has made it a very clear indication that the Raptors are definitely shopping Pascal Siakam behind the scenes. What it also is a big indication of is that this extension is on the table. There's no noise about anything going on because it's on the table. It's ready to go. The Raptors just need to figure out exactly who is going to be on their team before Gary Trent Jr. signs its extension. And thankfully, he won't become a third key free agent that becomes a free agent at the end of the season if that is the case. So how I imagine things will play out, I would still bet that Pascal Siakam remains with the Raptors. I would bet it if I could somewhere. I don't see the market available anywhere. I would wager Siakam stays with the Raptors because he has made it abundantly clear that he has no intention of signing an extension with any team who trades for him. So teams don't want to give away all these assets, all these draft picks for a player who's only going to be with the team for 1 year. So as far as Gary Trent Jr. goes, why this is such a big deal in terms of finances, because Gary Trent Jr. is set to sign a big extension. Gary Trent, I was expecting this summer to claim in the range of $22 to $23 million per year. Based on the way the market was going, I feel like every summer we get to this point. We're in early July, late July, where we see these contracts going out and we're dumbfounded. We're stunned by the financial amount that some of these contracts are claiming. But then we get to the next summer and then we are even more shocked by the ones in the next season, and all these contracts that are signed right now become a little bit more plausible, become a little bit more manageable for teams to handle. So for Gary Trent Jr., I thought that getting him in the range of 22 to 23 would be very good. But as I mentioned earlier, talks were in the range of apparently $26 to $27 million. And looking at that on the surface, that seems like quite a bit of money for Gary Trent Jr. But like I said, these contracts, they become more and more reasonable as time goes on. But for Gary Trent Jr., what he's going to have to do to make sure he's earning that money that seems to be already on the table for himself, what he needs to be doing is getting himself a little bit more in tune defensively. Don't make the defense a reason that you're coming off the floor. Don't make that the weakness in your game to be the excuse to give you less play time. Make sure you're manageable in those areas. And on the offensive end, I think that the player with the single most room to grow this season under the new head coach is going to be Gary Trent Jr. The system in which the Raptors played just did not quite cater to Gary Trent Jr.'s strengths enough. So I think it didn't get the most out of Gary Trent Jr., but ultimately the team didn't get the most out of itself in total, because if you're getting the most out of Gary Trent Jr., you're getting a wealth of floor spacing, you're getting a wealth of three-point production, and you're getting a wealth of isolation creation. In Gary Trent Jr.'s first full season with the Raptors, he was a wizard in the clutch as well. Like, it seemed as though in the first half of that 2021-2022 season, if we were in a clutch game late and we needed a big bucket, it was stick the ball in Gary Trent Jr.'s hands and get out of the way. But as Siakam got healthier, and the second half of that season, it very much was the Siakam show late in games. But Trent has shown some very good capabilities for a 24-year-old. I'm excited to see where he grows. $26 to $27 million, if that is the range, seems like quite a lot for the player, but he can certainly grow into that. At only 24 years old, if we're getting him for 4 more years, getting that contract, he's only going to be 28 years old, barely even starting the prime years of his career. So, opportunity knocks here for the Raptors. Playing under Darko Rajakovic is going to get more out of Gary Trent Jr. from a schematic standpoint. Gary Trent is excellent coming off of dribble handoffs and hitting shots, and he just never was provided the opportunity to do that with the Raptors. So, getting those opportunities, playing in a team system that now is going to make more sense this season, the sky is the limit for what Gary Trent Jr. can do with this team, and it's very refreshing to see that a player does want to remain with the team, and we are going to make it happen. But keep an eye on things right now, because there is a very clear reason why Gary Trent Jr.'s extension has almost gone under the radar now and is completely out of any sort of reports. And it has a lot to do with the Pascal Siakam situation, which we'll talk a little bit more about that on Friday. What did you guys make of this video? Drop a like if you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe to Amateur Hour Sports for more content like this. And I'll be back very, very soon for another video here on Amateur Hour Sports.